All right. Well, James,
Are
welcome
we
back,
up
bud.
and running? Are we up?
We are up.
My goodness, finally we get to talk about football on another Saturday, Josh. How are you doing?
Doing great, James. How are you? I know we're not in person this week, a little different than the last 2 weeks, but how are you doing?
I know I miss seeing your beautiful face, but honestly, I am doing great. A little tired, was out in the sun for a lot of the day, but inside right now, nice, comfy, and cozy, and ready to talk about some football in our last installment of the NFC offseason or NFL
Yeah.
offseason checklist
Yeah, we've
with the
well,
AFC
yeah,
East.
as I was saying, like you said, we've done 7 other, big videos going through each team, so it feels good to be on our last 4.
Yes, it does. Time flies by when you're having fun, but eventually the ship has to sail and it has to move on to bigger and better things. But man, we're forgetting one of the most modernly historic, but also
Mhm.
sad divisions in football. And that's what we get to talk about today. So, are you excited, Josh? Are you ready to have some fun?
Dude,
Talk about some football today?
how could I not be? I'm excited to, really go through the last 4 teams. So James, we have the Patriots, the Jets, the Dolphins, and the Bills today. So if you guys are new, kind of what our general schedule kind of goes with these teams. We talk about their overall preseason moves that include signings, draft picks, few trades for these teams, as well as potential outlook for the upcoming season. And at the end, we kind of wrap it up together with our 4 pillars. We like to say team that is most improved, least improved, probably winner of the division, and then loser of the division. So yeah,
Yeah, that works
Wait,
for me. That sounds
yeah.
perfect. Let's do it. Do you want to kick us off with your first team, or you want me to start it off?
Why don't you go first today, James?
But you're changing it up a little bit. I like that. Okay, okay. Well, thank you, first of all. But
Hmm.
first of all, yeah, I guess the first team we're going to talk about is the Buffalo Bills, best wings in the game, but also a team that went through some major shakedowns this offseason and trying to kind of like kind of in a similar boat as Baltimore, get past the hump, right? You've been playing really well for so long, and eventually you just say, you know what, I've had enough of it. Let's move on.
Hmm.
Started in the office, in the back office, the white collar jobs. Sean McDermott gone. Very surprising. I really like
Yep.
him. I think he's a great coach, but yet you keep Brandon Beane, you keep your president, you keep all those guys who have had a lot of questions and a lot of draft issues over the past couple of years. I mean,
Yeah, there's been
guys like
how I mean
Tyre Elam,
obviously
Keon
the
Coleman.
I was about to say the most recent ones. Keon Coleman has had so many question marks, not only his play on the field, but as well as effort off the field, practicing things like that as well. So there was definitely a lot of questions that weren't just around the head coach. They made this huge trade for DJ Moore. The entire situation with Josh Allen these past few years have been trying to get him weapons, and Stephon Diggs was an extremely important piece in his development, but as well as the fact that they felt like they needed to go out there and get another weapon. And so they go and they get DJ Moore. Now, we've kind of talked about the trade itself. I know James isn't necessarily here for right now, but the idea behind it is they gave up a lot for DJ Moore. They gave up a second, I believe, another pick down the road. DJ Moore is a receiver that's already 30, and there's big question marks regarding not only his age, but his production.
We definitely had a lot of questions about this
Hmm.
for a guy who is 30, 30 plus, hasn't had a thousand year, and getting him for a second round pick was extremely surprising. It shows you how desperate they are with their of kind of mediocre players: Khalil Shakir, Josh Palmer, Keon Coleman, DJ
Hmm.
Moore. All guys who you could consider as just really, really mediocre guys. And so you're hoping DJ Moore comes in as your official replacement for everything else. He's your number one target, but I am certainly skeptical. It feels like a reach. And this is the whole thing. I am very hesitant with their front office moves, or you could call it
Hmm.
back office, front office, whatever. But the firing of Sean McDermott, I get, but I don't, because I think he's a really good coach. And the whole thing with this coaching cycle was, there's not a lot of better coaches out there than Sean McDermott. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was a very tight coaching staff. So you obviously promote internally, But
Mhm.
the guy who has been doing the most questionable things in Brandon Bean and that back office says, "Hey, we're gonna keep our jobs. As a matter of fact, like, we're gonna get extended, we're gonna get all this stuff." And so
And
I have a lot of
even
questions.
an internal promotion as well. Not only did they
Yeah.
keep their jobs, but they went ahead and doubled down and promoted internally.
So it's really questionable when you're saying, "Hey, we're gonna tear the whole house down," and you end up only tearing half of it down, and it was the good side of it, it's like tearing down the nice part of your house. Going into free agency, it's kind of the same thing. They really kind of trimmed a lot, but also got a lot in a sense. Everything kind of reminds me of the DJ Moore trade. I'll explain this in a second. You start with getting a bunch. You start with tearing down your whole secondary, right? Trading Teron Johnson. You bring in Geno Stone and Chauncey Gardner Johnson as your new starting safeties alongside Cole Bishop. You're
Yeah.
not really sure what the plan is with that, but okay, do your thing. They're not good. They're older, and I'm not really sure why. Just because you couldn't get anyone else out there.
Yeah, and Chauncey
D
Gardner
Alford
Johnson,
signed
like, for
to.
example.
Sorry.
Yeah, for example, Chauncey Gardner Johnson has been on, at this point, it's probably like 6 different teams in the last 3 years. He's a
Yeah.
guy that, like, just constantly rotates teams. And while there's various teams where he has been, you know, very valuable, he's not that consistent 17-game starter, or at least I would hate if he was, my team's 17-game starter.
Yeah, and then yes, and it's the same thing with Geno Stone. You go into you're right, you also say, "Hey, we're gonna keep building up our secondary." You go sign D. Alford, 3 years, 21 million. It's a lot of money for an average cornerback, kinda like the Amik Robertson thing. He's not bad, he's not good, right? But you're paying him more money than I would have expected from him, and the same thing goes with Bradley Chubb. 3 years, 40 million. It's a lot for Bradley Chubb. You're basically this isn't, prime Bradley Chubb. He, again, much older prospect, much older player, kind of fell out of favor in Miami, wasn't producing the best, and you're giving him a big contract to
And
just say,
and
"Hey, you're a starting guy." So it seems
yeah,
like
and
they're
and for
really.
example, as well as they had Joey Bosa, who was on, like, that 1 year kinda, like, vet,
And he was
um,
really good.
and that's the
He
thing
was
is
he was super
he was
disruptive. He can
it fumbles, yeah. So, it's not like they went out and, like, got this veteran and did so well, they, gave him another contract because of how well he was. They went out and got a whole 'nother veteran who's had their whole other issue of, other issues and problems, and they're banking on the same production that they already had in-house. And Joey
Yeah,
Bosa would have
it's a
but
low value Joey Bosa signing, but you're adding more money to it.
exactly.
And what I mean by everything screams the DJ Moore signing is you're saying, "Hey, we have these holes in our roster," and you're plugging them in with guys who either are past their prime
Mhm.
or just don't have a prime at all. And you're giving them a lot of money, and it seems like they're just throwing bodies in there. It's the
Yep.
same thing with the interior offensive line. You lose Dylan Edwards, so you sign Lloyd Cushenberry and Austin Corbett, and you're
Mhm.
saying, "Hey, we're just gonna throw bodies in there," right? It might look good on paper, but these guys fell out of favor with teams. Like they weren't that good. They may have been good a little bit, but so I definitely have some questions with their offseason moves. They moved around a lot. They got a lot of players. I'll give them that they plugged up holes like the secondary, like offensive line, like the
Mhm.
pass rush, but everything just seems like they're just filling in with a bunch of random guys, and they're hoping that, hey, one of these guys is gonna be worth their contract or worth even more, or one of these players like DJ Moore is, hey, he's gonna be like Panthers DJ Moore and come back and have this great job because we have Josh Allen, because we have this really smart offensive coordinator, because we have a new coaching system. So I am a little hesitant. And then draft wise, interesting draft for the most part. You trade back into round two. You take TJ Parker, edge out of Clemson. Interesting player. He kind of reminds me of like a Bradley Chubb in a way. He definitely fits the prototypical kind of Bills defensive end. So I didn't mind the pick. It was like one of those picks where I was like, okay, like that's fine. Same thing in the third round, taking Davis Igbinosun from Ohio State. I know Ohio State fans are
Mhm.
not big fans of him. He got torched a lot. He was not necessarily the best player in the world, but you're banking on athletic upside and you're hoping that he turns it around. But really, like those were kind of the two memorable. I did like some of their later round picks. I liked Jalen Kilgore a
Mhm.
lot, and I also liked Zane Durant. I thought those were two really good upside guys in the 5th round. And then another one I really liked, and probably their most notable one, was Skylar Bell out of UConn. Fits exactly like how they like their receivers.
Yeah.
Like, fits exactly like Khalil Shakir.
I was about to say the
So, that
shorter, a more elusive route runners that, you know, may not always get like the big play, but can work out solid yards underneath for sure.
yeah, twitchy, explosive,
Mhm.
probably could be good in the return game, but I'm just kind of I guess what I'm saying is and their draft kinda to me was okay. I thought they had some good late round upside value picks. I thought their early picks weren't necessarily the best, but I think they do have some quality starters in that mix. The questions obviously I have is this team is this it, you know, it's Josh Allen. This team is too good to not go farther than where they are, where they have been. This is to me a very risky offseason because you're essentially saying it was all Sean McDermott, right? He was the guy we couldn't get
Mhm.
past the hump. And hey, we got the new offensive coordinator in. We got, we're giving Josh Allen all these guys. We're spending money in free agency for all these people. And you're saying, hey, this is finally when we get over the hump. And you brought in a ton of guys, but I don't see a lot of these guys being super prolific impact type of players that'll just blow up a team.
Yeah.
It's like you're throwing stuff at a wall and hoping something sticks, and I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily buy it. Now, obviously, I think this is gonna be a good team because, you have Josh Allen, you do have some good weapons on your offense, but the whole thing really is, hey, you revamped a lot of stuff. You kinda said, hey, what we were doing wasn't working. And the pressure to me out of anyone in the room is on not Josh Allen, it's on Brandon Bean. It's on the general manager, it's on the back office because you brought in so many new players. You
Mhm.
changed the coaching staff a ton. You had a really big draft, and the drafts that you had in the past are finally this is the year where they kind of have to it's a make or break. So it's almost like the analogy I'll say is you're putting all your chips out on the table, but you kind of have a bad hand.
Yeah, it's all bluff. I mean, I 100% agree with everything you said. This team, I think a casual NFL fan can't name more than 2 starters on this team, maybe 3 with the trade of DJ Moore. This team is strictly it's Josh Allen, James Cook on offense. They put all their eggs in the DJ Moore basket, arguably 4 years too late.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're hoping he can come in and contribute what Stephon Diggs was able to for those few years. He is way past his prime. And the thing is Josh Allen doesn't have that many more years where he can be at this elite MVP level. With his play
Mhm.
style, he's very reckless with the ball. We've seen that in plenty of times in playoff situations. He is that big body gunslinger. And if he's not able to use his legs as more consistency as he gets older within his years, that his straight passing is not going to be able to withstand that MVP level for very much longer. So that's the whole
Yeah, I
thing
mean,
with him.
yes, I do agree with
Hmm.
that. I think quarterbacks have that period, but I do think Josh Allen still has a lot of
And
life left within him. And I
100%.
also just think, the devil's advocate to what I was saying earlier. I mean, the guy right now for many people is the best player in the world, and I would not,
Hmm.
I'm almost I he's an amazing quarterback. James Cook has progressed into an amazing running back. They do have even though you did lose Dylan Edwards in free agency, you have a solid offensive line.
Right.
Defensively, you have, you're hoping to have stars. You poured so much into that defensive line room, right? Your linebackers too, and you poured so much into your secondary. So I think the other thing with Buffalo too is right is that you like, hey man, you're bringing in a lot of new faces, and I respect the fact that you're doing that. But at the same time, it's also like like, and I do get it, right? You're trying to get over the hump, and I appreciate them moving all these pieces, and I do think some of these guys could make impacts, you know?
Yeah.
I think they could do the right things, but, you know, obviously the advocate is that, hey, right? You give Josh Allen, you know, something like a DJ Moore, who's definitely been a lot better than, you know, Keon Coleman has been.
Yeah.
He's gonna make things happen. He's gonna
Mhm.
make things happen for your team. Defense, if the defense can just have some life and play some good football, he can get you far. And he did that last year too. So I think the advocate I'm trying to say is, right,
Mhm.
it may not you they got better, you know, maybe not overly better than people think, but better just enough where, you know, Josh Allen can turn this team like almost like a Patrick Mahomes situation into the best in the world.
Right, and I think that's what they're I mean, that's completely what they're banking on. If you're Brandon Beane right now, you're hoping that you're able to squeeze out all the life, from Josh Allen and his play style right now, because if they're not able to get, even to the playoffs, the entire front office is gonna be on fire.
Yes.
They basically they had their scapegoat in Sean McDermott, but if they aren't able to repeat or exceed the expectations into what their, success was last year, my gosh, Buffalo's going down in flames.
I agree with that, but I mean, it's Josh Allen versus the world
That's
every
the thing.
single time.
That's the thing. If he's able to keep up his production, which I think there's a high chance he's still able to do all the that Josh Allen magic, this could end up being just enough of an offseason and enough of allocating money and contracts to enough positions, especially with DJ Moore coming in and kind of solidifying that secondary as much as they can. That could have been enough. I still have a lot of questions throughout this team. I think we're going to see some of those kind of poor contracts really come into play as the season continues with, some big time, not only just like the starters going down, but Buffalo's always a team that's dealt with injuries, and I don't like their depth in a lot of places.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think that's something they've been trying to work on, but it just
Hmm.
hasn't hit. But yeah, so Buffalo, man, not necessarily the best conversation, but hey, you got Josh Allen, so there's
Yeah.
really, you know, not much there's not much bad. I think they still are very much in the contention for the AFC. But without further ado, Josh, what is your team that you're going to be talking about first?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the Patriots real fast. The Super Bowl runner-ups.
Oh, boy.
Before I get into their free agency, there's a few things I want to mention. A, this team was able to succeed, and with a quarterback that is still under the rookie contract, it was just his second year in the league last year. Their promise, I mean, they have so much incredible potential right now. And I
Mhm.
almost hate to say it because of the Patriots dynasty in the past, but there's a realistic future where this Patriots, they took 10 years off and then are right back to the dominance that they were in the 2000s.
Wow. Okay. Okay. All
Mhm.
right.
So yeah, they made a decent amount of different contracts. They went out and got a few different people. We just talked about the AJ Brown trade last week. So that's just a great value, getting a guy for it was a first round pick for next year. So it wasn't even in this, 2007 NFL draft. But as well as AJ Brown, they also went and got Romeo Dobbs, 4 years, 68 million. They were in desperate need of just wide receivers last year. Stephon Diggs, who what was he, 30, 33, 32, was your top
Yeah.
receiving threat. And yes, he was productive, but he's not the same player that they signed that massive contract to. And they just need to add more talent behind, Diggs, Pop Douglas, Keyshawn Booty. So
Well, I
Romeo
was kind of
Dobbs, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say something, you know, as a Packers fan with Romeo Dobbs, as I
Hmm.
think he's a good compliment to AJ Brown. I think AJ Brown's your big playmaking guy, and Dobbs is your kind of just technician, possession kind of receiver.
Right.
If it was the situation where they just signed Romeo Dobbs as your wide receiver 1, I would have
Hmm.
not liked it, but him as your wide receiver 2, I think next to AJ Brown is a really, really good compliment, and now their receiving room is loaded with depth. The only thing I'd say is that's a lot of money for a wide receiver 2 now, and just a lot of money for a Romeo Dobbs contract in general. 68 million for a
Yeah.
guy, it's kinda like, you know, for a guy
Hmm.
who has not even closely cracked 1,000 yards and has had some, you know, drop inconsistencies. I'm
Right.
not saying that I like him. I think he's a
Mhm.
good player, but it definitely is a risk. But you're saying again, hey, you have the best quarterback in the world on a rookie contract. Let's get you some weapons. But I think like, hey, this turned from one of the worst receiving rooms into one of the better 1-2 receiving punches in the league, and a really underrated one at that.
Yeah, 100%. This even kind of went off as, wow, such an overpay, for an unproven wide receiver 1 to, well, it's still an overpay, but that's a really good wide receiver 2 for the
Yes.
Patriots. And like you said, their wide receiver depth chart is really well balanced now. You have your big time receiving threat in AJ Brown. You have your, tactician route runner in Romeo Dobbs. Keyshawn Booty is kind of a little bit of everything. And then Pop Douglas is that speed slot, versatile player. So you kind of gotta be really happy with the opportunities and all these different targets that Drake May now has.
Yeah.
After Romeo Dobbs, they did go and get Elijah Vera Tucker to be that guard spot. I think he's probably going to end up being more that left guard. There's a few things. I like it as a player standpoint. Elijah Vera Tucker is one of the better younger guards in the league. The only
Yes.
issue is he's never played a full 17 game season. Injuries have been such a huge concern about him. Thing that is pretty funny though is his contract's a little bit different. There are like a little fine print at the bottom that if he does sustain, I think if he goes on the injury report at all, some of his money is voided, it's not guaranteed. So there's both promise as him as a player and there is some stability kind of insurance in the back end. So
Yeah.
hopefully Elijah Vera Tucker can finally play a full season and it can just help solidify this offensive line that's had various problems, especially on the left side. After him, they did get kind of like the maybe two more I want to talk about. Draymond Jones, outside linebacker, defensive end. This is a guy that was traded last season from the Titans to the Ravens, was really able to come in and be really good, especially in that run game, but as well as getting to the passer. This is your, Clavon Chason replacement. He is what he is. It was 3 years, 36.5 million. Draymond Jones is a little bit of an older player at this point. Kind of late into his career, was he really able to kind of hit his prime? It's a lot of money for him to me, but he does add veteran presence, depth, and some pass rush juice. Lastly, I want to talk about Kevin Byard, who they got for 1 year, 7 million. They lost some of their safeties in this offseason period, and Kevin Byard is just last year, he was a second team All Pro?
Yep. Second team All Pro.
Second All Pro. He's led the league in interceptions multiple times throughout his career. He is, again, very old, but as you saw last year, he is very, very valuable, especially in that back end. I see him taking up very much of like that Devin McCourty role that the Patriots have for
Yeah.
so
And you
long.
reunite him with Vrabel too.
Exactly, which I've trying to stay away from, some of the stuff that's happened with Variable over this season.
That is, yes, it's a great point too, is that'll be interesting to see how that works out. It seems
Exactly.
like it's kind of been swept under the rug, but I
Even
guess kind of to say
yeah,
that a little bit about the free agency stuff.
mhm,
Yeah, this is contending moves. This is what
100%.
contenders do. I think it's a lot of replacements, but for money, like a lot of money. I think some of them are pretty hit or miss. It's same thing with free agency, but I think a lot of these guys are. Draymond Jones, it's a lot of money for
Mhm,
a Kayvon Chason replacement. He's a guy who has been super up and down in his career. He
yep.
played for the Broncos and then
Then was
took
signed
a
by Titans
massive
last
contract with
offseason with Seattle, yes.
and then didn't work out there, comes back, is kind of a journeyman, and then kind of blows up again. Uh, AVT's the same way. Or AVT, like you said, injury
Yep.
concerns are definitely there, which is something they can't really afford. And then the other side of it, with Byard and
Mhm,
Byard's, you're right. He is an older prospect. He's a lot older. And then Romeo Dobbs is the same thing. He's a solid guy, but is that worth that much money for a wide receiver too? So again, contending moves, I like it. There
mhm,
is definitely there's individual risk for each of the prospects that are very, very tangible.
100%. After the free agency, they had a few picks in this draft. There's really two I want to mention. First one, first round pick, a pick 28, they went with Caleb Lamu from Utah. This is your long-term projected right tackle starter. I don't see him being the day one starter, especially when you bring in someone like Elijah Vera Tucker. You have Mike Onwenu on right guard. And I think Jared Wilson, last year's left guard, is going to move back to center. So you bring in a guy very similar to kind of the Panthers situation where you bring in a really good offensive tackle to kind of just sit and learn, especially with Caleb Lamu, who was someone that was super athletic, but not the biggest. So come in, can kind of get that 1 year under his belt, get the Patriots nutritionist, kind of be able to lift a little more weights and then kind of end up being that starter long term. I do want to mention one other pick, their second round pick 55, Gabe Jackas. I don't know if you've heard much about this. This one's super interesting. Gabe Jackas is very much kind of like a
I
Draymond
have
Jones. It's very much like the Draymond Jones play style of a defensive end. He is currently the only rookie that's yet to sign his contract. Did you know that?
really, I've heard he hasn't even shown up to camp.
So the issue is he recently had a surgery on his shoulder that was undisclosed to everyone. No one knew, especially the Patriots. And he went out and had the surgery. I don't know. I think it was a significant enough surgery where he was not able to come back to the field. And because of this, the Patriots, even with physicals and the interviews in the combine, zero idea about this, which has led to their, a few issues with this contract, especially with undisclosed, surgery. And so now I hate to say it might be another Shamar Stewart situation, but he's the only unsigned rookie because of this surgery.
Yeah, that's the one thing that hasn't been going well for the Patriots way is just off-season drama, and that's certainly something that's I mean, and you liked him a lot. You liked
Yep.
him. We thought he was gonna go to the Patriots a couple times too,
Mhm.
just because of how aggressive and how much of a Vrabel mentality he was, but
100%.
not a good look. Yeah, I think it is certainly interesting the
Mhm.
fact that you take a kind of a long-term right tackle that's not really gonna start in a like, again, in a year where you're expected to contend for a Super Bowl. It seems like you're kinda making up for it by signing all these other guys, and you're saying, "Hey, we're gonna put this one for the future," which I don't mind that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
the
that's
offseason.
no, and I 100% agree with you. We just saw this team, their Super Bowl window is right now. And so I'm never going to hate a team for going and getting, depth along the offensive line.
Well,
I mean, they're
especially in their case with their issues on the offensive line in the Super Bowl. Yeah, I think the obvious question is can they do it again? They definitely were a team where even in the Super Bowl, you just knew they weren't the best team and good enough to win that game. Right now, you get guys like AJ Brown, AVT, Romeo
mhm,
Dobbs. You really supply Drake May, MVP Drake May, with a ton of weapons. Right, you have second year Travion Henderson. And then on the defensive side, you just kind of maintain your core group because you spent so
right?
much on that last year.
And
So it's
n-
it's it's
it,
again, it's
yeah,
this
that,
team is trying to contend
mhm,
and they have a title window with a quarterback on a rookie contract, and this is the whole saga. It's been like this for the past, yeah, I don't know, forever.
mhm,
Bills, Patriots. Who's gonna do it, right? Patriots did it last time. The Bills have done it multiple times before, but the Patriots, I think, had the better offseason. But
yeah,
I just think they need to take the next step up. And you might be saying, what else is there for them? Because they made a Super Bowl, right? That's like the best thing you can do. That shows that you're the best. Their Super Bowl run was not pretty. Not
no,
not very pretty. Offensively, even defensively at time. Defensively they were really, really good, but
mhm,
overall, not the prettiest Super Bowl run. And one of the uglier Super Bowls that I've watched from a standpoint.
right. And
They
that's
need to
the
take
thing.
that step up to finally say, "Hey, we're contending with
Mhm.
some of these NFC juggernauts, and we're ready to play ball."
And you can directly see this with their acquisitions, especially with AJ Brown
Yeah,
and Romeo Dobbs. They realized that they had an issue last year with their, weapons, especially their wide receivers, and they go and get, I'm not gonna say the two top guys on the market, but one of the top guys on the market, and then they went and they banking on someone with strictly potential and Romeo Dobbs, who's never been a premier, target for the Packers.
yeah.
Now, like I was saying before, picking Cade Lamu, first round, I don't hate it. Obviously, Morgan Moses at your right tackle is not going to be, your right tackle for too many years in the future. And they had a lot of injuries on that offensive line, so getting depth is great. I'm looking at this team though. I'm kind of upset they didn't really target their, linebackers, especially their middle linebackers that much. Christian Ellis and Robert Spillane are not the greatest players. I'm a little not upset, but especially with this draft class, like CJ Allen, Jacob Rodriguez, Anthony Hill, those were guys that went pretty early on. I'm a little surprised that they didn't go out and take one of these guys with some of their earlier picks.
Yeah, I do agree with you on
Hmm.
that, but I also think they trust their guys, and I know they
Which is
just signed
fair.
Spillane. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this team takes a step up or takes a step back in the
Yeah.
future with all their offseason acquisitions.
And
But
with a harder schedule also.
yes, much harder schedule. But we talk about the 2 juggernauts,
Mhm.
right? The 2 juggernauts that are gonna go toe to toe. And now we gotta talk about the other 2 teams that are kind of, thrown into the trash can. And I got the Jets. I got the New York Jets. They have one of the weirdest off seasons that I love and hate. They obviously blew up their entire roster. This was the first year of the rebuild. Horrible year for them overall. Classic Jets season, right? You go out and their off-season additions really, we talked about this. Their off-season additions do not necessarily match the path that they're on. And
Right,
I'll
doesn't
explain
doesn't
this.
match their
In
timeline as a team.
in Demario, right? You signed Demario Davis, 2-year, 22 million, 35-year-old linebacker. He's an amazing player. Don't get me
Mhm,
wrong. He's still a great player at 35 years old. He reunites back with the Jets. He's your prime, signal caller leader on the defense. You bring in Joseph Osai, 3 years, 36 million. A guy you're banking on upside, rotational pass
mhm.
rusher. Maybe hasn't had the best career, but certainly has flashes, and you're expecting him to be kind of a rotational defensive lineman with pass rushing upside. Not my favorite contract in the world, but you definitely need bodies in there. Another former Packer, Kingsley Ngabare. He's your run stuffing edge. That's really all he does. He's great at run stuffing, but not really a lot in the pass rush. David Onyemeta, 1-year contract, 10.5 million, veteran defensive tackle, still a good player, but kind of a guy you're sitting in for 1 year, can provide upside the defensive tackle room. Probably one of my favorite contracts was Nashawn Wright, 1 year's 5.5 million. I thought he was going to get a lot more money than this,
Mhm.
but this is just a really good low risk, high reward type of guy. It's for the team that never recorded an interception to get the guy that had the most interceptions in the NFL, I think is a great signing for
Yeah,
filling need.
it's the
Um,
perfect pairing, especially for such a position of need, and you go and get not only the guy that was able to show, exactly what they need at the highest level, but then also in such a cheap contract without
yes.
any risk.
Yes, absolutely. And then trades, they bring in Minka Fitzpatrick on a trade. Again, guy kind of past his prime, but you get him for good value. He's definitely better than what you've already had. And then the weirdest one, hey, why not reunite with Geno Smith? This definitely is just because Dante Moore screwed him over. That's just been really rough for the Jets this whole season, was the fact that he saw he was probably going to go to the Jets and was like, no, I don't really want to. So he just bailed ship. So I like some of their moves, right? This was
Yep.
a team that really lacked direction and lacked leadership and just lacked quality players. You get that with a lot of these veterans. Leadership, they were some of the best players at their position. They're definitely better than what they've had. But just again, you're getting guys past their prime, right? These are moves that contenders would make. Bringing in veteran quality defensive tackles for really expensive 1-year contracts.
Yeah, and bringing
This
in,
is this team is
30.
not built for
Yeah,
Jets team is not built for a Super Bowl run. This Jets
no,
team is built for
in the team that you bring in a 35-year-old linebacker in, or you go and trade for a 30-plus-year-old safety that's kind of is past his prime actually, in Minka Fitzpatrick, or a 33-year-old quarterback.
yeah.
Gino might be older than
So
that, but doesn't make any sense.
I think these contracts are more. I thought about it, right? Because I was like, I hate this. I hate this. I think it is definitely more of like, hey, we need to have some sort of direction. We need to have some sort of leadership. We need to coach up a lot of these young guys that are coming in, because this team was just super undisciplined. It lacked any direction. And these guys are kind of your hold-ins, right? Your stay-ins as a team, to hopefully, not be as terrible as before. But again, if you're gonna be bad and you're gonna just say, "Hey, this is development," why not just do it? Why not just get it over with? You right? Maybe sign 1 or 2 of these guys and
Right.
just kinda have the young guys kinda
Mhm.
develop in the future. I think this is also just Aaron Glenn trying to save his job, right? And
100%.
just scour a bunch of guys and say, "Hey, maybe win me a couple more games," right? And if you leave in a year, that's fine because 'cause we'll just draft more guys with all the capital that we have. So, mixed feelings on the free agency. The draft, yeah, they had a lot. They had a lot of picks, 3 first-round picks. Start by taking David Bailey, your classic just super freak athlete, prime physical pass rusher. One of the best fit spin moves I've ever seen from a defensive end.
Yeah, it
The
looks like,
question is, can
Dwight
he
Freeney,
yeah,
some of
it
his
is
plays.
exactly. Can he keep it up? Can he maintain his production? He's not your run stuffing guy. That's why you brought in Tavondre Sweat, which was a trade I really liked. He's basically like Will McDonald. Hey, your job is to get after the quarterback as much as possible, right? So there's definitely some risk with him, but I also think this is something that the Jets need. They need just game wrecking ability on their defensive side of the ball. That's something they did not have at all last season. They need a guy alongside Will McDonald. Jermaine Johnson was just too injury prone to do that. So flip him for Tavondre Sweat to get your run defense and bring in David Bailey as your guy, right?
Mhm.
A lot of people were ragging on the pick. I don't mind it. I just don't know. It's one of the more just kind of like, oh, this was your number 2 guy on your board, but I still like
Right.
it for the Jets. Probably one of the more surprising picks in the draft,
Mm.
taking Kenyon Sadiq. This is similar to the Rams taking 2 tight ends
Max
back-to-back
Clare
years with
and
high
Terrence
picks.
Ferguson in back-to-back
Um,
years.
Mason Taylor is kinda your do-it-all guy. Kenyon Sadiq is your receiver. Like, he is your
Yeah.
receiver in a tight end's body. Maybe not can block, not the
Mhm.
best blocker, but man, again, freak athlete, really good in the receiving game, great yak ability. He's basically another receiver to add. I think this is kind of a Colston, and I think we're gonna see this a lot more, is a Colston Loveland trend with what the Chicago Bears did, right? A guy who, hey, he's basically your like an Eli Sowers, he's basically your 4th receiver on the board. Um,
Yeah,
and then
and
you have Mason
you
Taylor
know,
in the back.
to throw in some ideas there, especially when you look at this team and you take away Garrett Wilson and then you haven't mentioned him yet, but Omar Cooper, there's not much talent in this wide receiver room. And so when you bring in a
Yes.
guy like Kenny Sadiq, and especially with the depth behind him and Mason Smith, you're expecting him to take that step not only as that, standard inline tight end, but as well as I can see it, half his snaps going out wide as a receiver or even be a stand up, kind of slot player. That's just not me making something up. We've seen this all, of course, different teams. Of course, the Bills have done it for many years with, Dawson Kincaid and Knox, Colson Loveland as well. And that you can kind of see it as teams are implementing more and more tight ends, especially early in the draft. The whole idea that the 12th, even 13 personnel is becoming such a huge concept in today's game. You can see ideas like this, and I could definitely see the Jets come in this year and really kind of implement that system.
Yeah. Yes, and like you said, this receiving room is not big. When you had AD Mitchell as your wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, and I think he still has a lot of upside, it's not the best
Hmm.
look in the world, and again, I think it's really high of a pick when you
Yep.
had so many other needs in certain positions, but I kinda think they just went best player available, which I don't mind either.
Yeah,
Um
I think the stat was I think it's the first time a tight end has been taken in the first round who has less than 600 career receiving yards in his college career.
Yeah, that's actually crazy. I did not know that, but
Yep.
it really is just banking on athletic upside, taking the best player available, but
Hmm.
it'll be interesting to see how they utilize him and how he really makes out with all those intangibles. And then finally, the one you mentioned, Omar Cooper Jr., trading
Yep.
back up with the 30th pick. Really like this one. Receiver was desperate need. He's your
Hmm.
slot. He is your immediate starting slot, a wide receiver too, slot receiver, maybe, has some things to work on in regards to his route running, but just a really, really, really good player. I like this pick
Yeah,
a
and
lot. I
he's
think they
very explosive as well after the catch, which I think we're
yes.
seeing more and more of within like upcoming drafts and situations like that. So not only is he can be that wide receiver too, but he can truly be a weapon in that return game and in different occasions and that running game as well.
Yes, yeah, I just think they need skill positions, skill impact players, and I think they took two of the best available on the board.
Mhm.
I don't mind that at all. Try to get people next to Garrett Wilson, but I like their first round, right? You get bodies, you get some of the best players available on the board. You're changing your skill room, you're trying to change your pass rushing identity.
Yeah.
And then the final pick I'll mention, another one we had kind of mocked here because he just fits that Aaron Glenn mold is D'Angelo Pons. This guy would be flying up boards if he wasn't 5'9", but
Yeah.
really one of the most physical, aggressive, tough corners, plays really well in coverage, just an overall really good player whose one knack is that he's just really undersized for the position. But I,
Mhm.
again, really like this for the Jets. Continue to develop your secondary, get a guy that fits a really physical, grimy mold, can probably be your slot corner of the future. So overall with the Jets draft, I like the draft, right?
Yep.
You load up on talent, you load up on some really good players, you
Mhm.
redefine some of your areas of interest and some of your positional groups. I think that Darren Moji has so far killed it as a GM for the Jets. It'll be interesting to see how the free agency works, but with this Jets team, it's all about development. You are
Right.
not going to win a lot of games. You
Mhm.
are basically waiting for what quarterback is going to be the best next year, and you're saying, "Hey, we're going to get our guy, whoever that is." This is again just kind of like right. You
Mhm.
throw in a bunch of people, but in a better way, and you're saying, "Hey, I'm expecting some sort of improvement, some sort of life to the compared to the disastrous season that we had." And I'm expecting that some of these young guys and some of the guys that have been in the program really start showing out and showing upside. This team is nowhere near the playoffs. They will probably have a top 5 pick next year, top 10 pick, but you
Yeah,
are
I'm sure.
hoping
I'm
for
sure
just a
Dante.
little bit
Yeah,
more.
I'm sure Dante Moore is pretty upset about that idea as well.
Yes, it would be so I've thought about it. It's like it would be so funny
Mhm.
if he was taken with the Jet like, he was, like, hoping that the Jets wouldn't take him, and then the next year, they're like, "Oh, well, we're gonna take you anyways." Another interesting thing, and
Mhm.
I don't know if we wanna talk about this now or not, is the question I'll ask you this question is, right, in their situation, do they use a high capital draft pick,
Honestly.
Brendan Sorsby, in the supplemental draft?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, for the people who don't know, the supplemental draft is a additional draft for players that are ineligible to go back to college and miss the deadline to and put their name in the draft. It is it's it's rare that the draft really happens. Only I think the last time it happened was 4 or 5 years ago with Jalen Thompson, now the
Yep.
Cowboys starting safety. Before that, Josh Gordon was in it at one point. It's rare, and so how it works, it's less of a it's like a hidden bidding system where teams
Yes.
can put
Yeah.
in teams can put in a bid. They can put in their next year's draft pick, and the
Like
whole
an
thing.
auction, basically,
Yeah, and the whole thing
to
about it.
see.
Exactly, but the part is you don't know what anyone else put in it. So, for
Yeah.
example, the Jets they're in prime position to go throw a draft pick in there because right now their draft pick stands at number 2. So, and the Raiders aren't gonna throw in a pick. So, if the Jets wanted to go and get a different experimental quarterback like Brendan Sorsby, they can throw, maybe a 5th or a 4th round pick, probably a 5th, a 6th, or a 7th in their next year, and have the highest chance of bringing in a really talented quarterback that has, some off the field issues. So if I'm
Yeah,
them,
I think
I don't see why not.
the thing is what's gonna be really interesting
Mhm.
is, how much he goes for. I think I've heard reports that it could be as high of, like, a second round pick
Yeah,
for
which is
him.
crazy.
It's crazy, but again, right, you think about
Yeah.
teams that could use him and could be desperate to show.
Mhm.
I think the Jets are in the same position. They've shown they'll make some crazy moves if they're desperate to kinda rebuild and change. So I wouldn't be surprised if they say, "Hey, we value this guy, right? We're gonna," yeah, almost like Mendoza and Kirk Cousins. We
Yeah.
bring in Geno Smith, he might start for a little bit, you get the ropes, and we're gonna see how you play. There are definitely a lot of other
Mhm.
teams I could see doing the same thing. But it'll be I just kinda wanna throw that out there because, again, like I said, this team has a long way to go. You can kind of bank on a guy, but at the same time, you also did draft Cade Klubnik
And that's the thing.
from Clemson.
And
Uh,
yes, he
so
might have been, a 5th round pick, but at the same time, and with Brendan Sorsby, if this was a different upcoming quarterback draft class, because right now it's projected to be one of the most talented and overall, depth piece quarterback classes we've seen in a long time. If it was a different quarterback class with maybe a little less talent, even this year's, I could see Brendan Sorsby going up for a higher price than what he'll probably end up going for in the supplemental draft.
yeah, I could.
Because to me, I think he was probably the second best quarterback in this draft class right now behind Mendoza.
Yeah, I
So,
think so. I think he definitely would have been like that guy. But again, it'll be really interesting to see where he goes. I know it's kind of like taking a side off of it, but
but
I guess yeah,
definitely.
that's kind of what I have for the Jets. I think I like it. A
Hmm.
little confused, but I just think they're trying to save some skin and expect this season not to be great, but expect some guys to start flashing and have some developments across the board. So
Yeah, no, and last point for me is I think they're in a standstill. I think their team is not, there's not enough talent on their roster to be able to compete. I think with bringing in some of those veterans, Demario Davis, Minka, Gino, those are strictly, trying to save Aaron Glenn's job. He did that just to try to bring a little more talent and try to kind of stay at least a little competitive to potentially keep his job. You see, there were even reports last year of him being on his way out. So I think he brought in those few veterans to really kind of try to stay in that competitive side. Only question is this keeping reps away from younger guys that have higher potential? For example, Jordan Battle, as a safety, or Cade Klubnik at quarterback. Does this hurt their future or risk their future for a little extra success right now? Is a big question mark.
yes, I agree with that too. Yeah.
So that's another situation we're just going to have to see. I wouldn't be surprised if, Cade Klubnik ends up starting half the games this upcoming season. So,
Yeah, I could see that. Yep, definitely could see it be better than Davis Cook.
yeah,
I think
that's for
that's
sure.
so. But
But yeah,
without further ado, the last team and arguably the one with the most questions.
yeah, yeah. So last team, the Miami Dolphins. There's a lot to go through. I think we'll start off with this. They I finally cut ties with their past regime. Mike McDaniel's gone. Tua Tagovailoa's gone. No, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, all of their players, Minka Fitzpatrick, gone. They looked at themselves and said that they had success in the past, especially with their offense system, Tyreek Hill, situations like this, Jalen Waddle. Now they look and they're like, it's not sustainable. We've had too many question marks about our key players. Tua's had too many injuries, inconsistencies. We got to do something different, which I respect. I respect that they figure out the timing wise and they're cutting it off. Now, with cutting it off, it also leads to the fact that they have the highest dead cap penalty ever recorded. They're at
Yep.
because of especially Tua's contract, who he just signed last offseason by himself. I think he had 49. No, it was over 50 million just by himself that's in dead cap this year because it wasn't able to get traded. Or no, he was able to get. I don't remember the
No, he never
Falcons.
got traded.
Yeah,
He
no,
never got traded. He got
right. Falcons were able just to sign him. They didn't get traded. But between him and Tyreek Hill, the amount of dead money on this team, insane. So with that much dead money, they don't have that much money to spin around to make their team competitive. They go and get Jeff Hafley as their new head coach. He comes in and immediately says, hey, it's going to take us a few years. We're not looking to compete right now. We're looking as a full rebuild. And based off their signings and draft picks, 100%. Their biggest contract, they go and they get former Packer Malik Willis, 3 years, $67.5 million. High potential guy. Obviously, he showed some extreme flashes last year. Former second round pick from the Titans out of Liberty. This is a guy that's always had that talent, just very inconsistent. So I don't necessarily know if he's going to be able to succeed enough with the bare minimum talent around him in the next few years, or this is a guy that can actively make them competitive within 1 to 2 years, and this is your quarterback on a really cheap
You're
deal.
basically throwing a wish in a well and hoping that it comes true. He's
Exactly.
had flashes, but it's been like 5 games, and you're saying, "Hey, the Packers
Mm-hmm.
regime, that's where he thrived," which he did. But it's also the fact that they can afford to do that. They're in a position where
Mhm.
they're so low in a position, they could say, "Hey, this guy might be horrible. We don't
Exactly.
care because
And
we
and
are
that's the point.
banking
That's the point is
that he
they
could
don't
be
care.
really, really good too."
If he's terrible, they get a high draft pick and one of the like I just said earlier, one of the best quarterback classes. If he's the best quarterback out there, then you have the best quarterback on a really cheap 3-year deal. And even put this, because of their money situation, they're paying him bare minimum this year with like it was like 22 and a half in guarantees this year. And they're paying him 1.4 million base salary.
Wow.
So this is no risk on Malik Willis. As soon as he signed it, he was given 22 and a half million. So why not take this deal, especially if you're
Yeah.
unproven? Behind that, they did re-sign Greg Dulcich, 1 year, about 3 million. He came along a little bit at the end of the year last year. He's a guy that's been very up and down in his career. He showed a lot of flashes with the Broncos in the past. He's also shown where he's not able to stay on a team. So interesting there. I do like him as a tight end prospect. He showed a lot. Behind them, they just went out and they just threw, a vet minimums at a few different people. They went and got Tutu Atwell, David Ojabo, Jamari Sawyer, Jalen Tolbert, Joshua Uche, and a bunch more. But it was basically guys that have been in the league for a decent amount of years that have shown some sort of, peak, some sort of talent sometime in their career. And they're just banking that they're able to get just a little bit back from them,
Yeah.
which
You're
is fine. You don't
you're
have that much
banking that.
money. And
Yeah.
you're throwing all this to the wall and you're hoping 1 to 2, maybe even 3 of, these 20
And they
guys
look
that
like
you
the best
signed.
contracts. They're like, how are people it's like signing a bunch of, Zach Bonds, right? You're taking these
Exactly.
guys who just have been journeymen or
Exactly.
backups or just average starters, and you're saying, "Hey, in this new system, you could
Mhm.
all of a sudden become an amazing player. We don't care."
Mhm. Exactly. And then their draft. This is very interesting. There's a few picks I absolutely love. There's a few I don't. One of those, and there's some that I'm right in the middle with. And one of those, kind of middle of the picks, their first round pick, Caden Proctor. He was the second offensive lineman drafted. He played, there was a lot of questions. He played tackle throughout Alabama, and there's a lot of questions. And it's come out that he's going to go ahead and play left guard, which
Yep.
I'm fine with. The only issue is you're taking a guy that's very unproven. He's had very up and down, as a left tackle, and you're moving him to a brand new position, which is fine. He has the talent, he has the size, the strength. My only thing is a few picks later, Vega Ione went, who is that guard, who has played that guard position throughout his entire career, and who has shown the ability to be one of the best guard prospects we've seen in the last few years. So I'm a little confused why they didn't go ahead and go for the slam dunk pick in Vega Ione, but instead they're going for they're going for the more upside, but a guy who realistically is probably never going to come close to the talent that Vega Ione is, especially just in the idea and concept of being that guard spot.
Yeah.
Now,
I think he's like it's just again, it's you're hoping 'cause I
exactly,
mean, you look at it, dude, the guy is a specimen of
exactly.
size, and when he was at his premier size, he played
hmm
really well. Um,
I
but yeah,
understand it. I understand it if you're wanting him to play tackle long term, like Francis Moyoaga with the Giants. He's playing guard right now, and the eventual is to go and play right tackle. There's no, straight pathway for Caden Proctor to play, offensive tackle, and especially not left tackle, where he played throughout his entire college career. So I just have a
yep,
few questions on that. They had a second first round pick. That was Chris Johnson, corner from San Diego State. It's another one that I'm kind of right in the middle with. It's a little bit higher than a lot of people expected. He is a very physical, very fast, young corner that really showed up, during the combine as well as the Senior Bowl. I have a lot of questions. He wasn't necessarily the best corner left on the board. Colton Hood went a few picks later in the second round to the Giants. It's another player that I'm assuming they just really, really liked and are banking on that potential, which is fine because of their talent on the team right now. And
yeah,
with their clear pathway of they're throwing stuff and seeing who sticks. I'm going to do a few more. Jacob Rodriguez, linebacker, is their next pick. I love this pick, especially with already such a talented linebacker group that they have, right there in Miami. You bring in a guy that can do a little bit of everything. He's very good in taking the ball away. He's good in coverage. Basically he's almost like that safety in that linebacker spot, especially in a NFL that are moving more and more to athletic tight ends. I would never be upset with you taking more and more athletic linebackers to combat that. So I love that pick. I mean, they made a lot of picks. Caleb Douglas, wide receiver. This is probably the one of the pick that I kind of disliked a lot.
Yeah.
He was never the premier target on his team. There were various other wide receivers on the board that were, higher production, higher potential. Not my favorite. No, Chris Bell, Kyle Lewis, Michael Taft, DJ Campbell are all picks I do really like in the back end. All of them, I can see them having some sort of high production for this team, high snaps. Other than that, Will McCarrick, Trey Moore, some other picks that just aren't my favorite. So it's a lot. They used every pick that they had, which I love. There's some
Yeah.
that I really, really like in Jacob Rodriguez, Michael Taft, DJ Campbell. There's some I don't, and there's some that I'm just in the middle with. So the team that can literally do whatever they want, they made it known that they're going to do whatever they want with these players.
Yeah, I think Miami is kind of like the
Mhm.
Jets. If you want to tank, this is the right way how to do it. You scrap everything and you say, "Hey, we're gonna give it all to young players, guys. Just have upside, and we're gonna
Yeah.
build it through that."
Mm.
Yeah, Miami certainly had a draft. I think this definitely was kind of similar to kind of what the Jags did in a way.
Yeah,
It's like, hey,
100%.
we are just gonna get the guys that we like and not necessarily on the consensus, which is surprising
'Cause
because, right, you have nothing, so why
right,
not just get
you
the
would
best players
exact
available?
so then there comes the
Um,
conversation of, do you go best player available, or do you go with your draft board?
yeah, so it's certainly interesting that a
Mhm.
team tanking this hard kinda went the other route. I respect them for using all their picks because 'cause you're right.
Yeah,
I would probably say 90% of these guys are gonna start.
that's the thing
Maybe
also,
every
right?
single one of them will probably start
Mhm.
once this season. This is the way to tank. Right, hey, they're probably if there's a team that's in the runner-up for having the number 1 overall pick, the Miami Dolphins are definitely close, and that's
100%.
fine because, again, all you're looking for is you're
Mhm.
looking for some of these guys to do well. Best case scenario, Malik Willis is a really good quarterback, and then you go, "Hey, we're just gonna start drafting guys around him. We don't need to spend a pick on a quarterback."
And you can also
Worst
say the
case
opposite as best case scenario. Everyone else around Malik Willis starts doing really well. Caleb Douglas, Jalen Tolbert, Tutu Atwell all kind of come into their own, Greg Dulcich, and then Malik Willis isn't the answer. Okay, that's fine. Then you can
yeah.
just draft a quarterback. So
So I think
it's a lot of flexibility.
it's very flexible, right?
Mhm.
You gotta see something do work out. This is definitely a regime that has been through a lot, and they're hoping for just a fresh, clean start. And AU basically wiped the entire board clean and are starting. So Miami definitely, it's not going to be the most fun season, but it's certainly going to be very interesting to see how the developments are for
Mhm.
the future. But with that being said, they got a lot of room left. These last two teams we talked about are basically the bottom feeders looking to kind of scrape up to the two top teams, and the two top teams are the guys that are saying, "Hey, we're going to try to go to a Super Bowl
100%.
and win the whole thing because we need to. Our window is closing." So very polarizing division, but with that out of the way, Josh, we have finally done it. We have talked about every single team in the
Yeah.
off-season checklist. Yay, yay,
Yeah, I know.
yay. How are you
Congratulations.
feeling? How do you feel?
Feel great. It's funny because we've talked so much about the draft in the off season that I feel like we've kind of really hit every point, which I love. And then now we can kind of move our perspective more into this upcoming season, and we can really start to get into those nitty gritty details of our expectations, predictions, things of that nature. So I'm excited that we spent enough time in between the seasons, and now we're able to kind of rotate up towards the next.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's gonna be good. We've kind of left no stone unturned in
Hmm.
our path to the NFL offseason, and now we are making our way to the gates of the 2026 to 2027 NFL season. Boy, am I excited, and I know
Yeah,
you
dude.
are because we've been doing this for a long time, and by golly, we love football. But with that out of the way, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Goal Line
The
Guys.
goaling
We
is,
hope
yeah.
you enjoyed. Josh, thank you so much. Sorry about the technical difficulties earlier.
We make it
That will not
work.
stop us from talking about football. Uh,
Never.
but yeah, I am excited for what's going to happen in the future. Make sure to like and subscribe, all that stuff, I'm not shameful plug, if whatever. But
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, and like you said previously, I think looking into our kind of the next few weeks, I think we're going to do a little more interactive stuff. I'm sure and everyone's kind of sick of us just staying here and just talking about, 4 teams in an hour and a half. So I think in the future, we're looking at a little more interactive stuff. So stay tuned to that. And James, without further ado, thank you for, staying here, hopping on, going through some technical difficulties with me. And I will see you next time.
Yes, sir. You have a good one, brother.
All right, you too.